Hello and welcome to Chapter 12, Social Psychology. Here again we have a chapter that is a whole course that I teach on social psychology. So if you ever have a chance to take the whole course to go into so much more than we're going to be talking about today. But essentially what we're going to do today is look at the connection between these terms, social and psychology. So social refers to the context, the social context in which a person's psychology is acting. So it's the group that we belong to, it's the social situation that we might be in at any particular moment, it's effects of our culture. It's taking the whole field of sociology and combining it with the whole field of psychology to see how those things interact. So let me show you an example of a social situation in which there are factors at play. Here is a group of individuals. They're gathered together. They may be a team. They may be a problem-solving group. That might be a support group. Might be an Alcoholics Anonymous group. It can be any one of those things. We can, however, suppose that each one of these individuals has a unique personality, and they have personality traits that exhibit themselves in different situations, yet you will see that each one of these individuals at this moment in time within this particular situation are probably in compliance with the written or unwritten rules of engagement that have been set forth in this particular group. Let's say, for example, that this group is a support group. Let's say it's an Alcoholics Anonymous group. Now, one of the rules of Alcoholics Anonymous is that you don't share your last name. You simply refer to yourself in the first name and you refer to others. Even if you know them, even if you know their last name, you only use their first name within that group. Now, that's a rule of the group. It's a norm. It's a standard. It's an expectation for behavior within that group. And individuals who choose to be part of that group are expected to act that way. That is an example of the kinds of forces that groups have on our behavior. We can think of this very easily. You have a set of friends and you have a set of grandparents, let's say. Is your behavior different when you're hanging around with those two different groups? Of course they are. And if they're not, well, there you go. You have some pretty interesting friends or you have some pretty cool grandparents. So, when we are in social situations like this, we experience a certain amount of power that influences our behavior. The sum total of what you see in terms of everybody's behavior is a result of situational or dispositional factors. So situation refers to the social part, disposition refers to the psychology part. The situation, the social aspects and norms and expectations of this particular group. And dispositional is the kind of person you are. And again, you'll see personalities represent themselves, but they will be within this context that we call a social group. Now, social psychology borrows a lot from the field of sociology, which I also teach. And that brings over some very interesting theories and thoughts that we have in the field of sociology and how they relate to our psychology. So let's take a look at some of those theories or some of those models, ways of understanding the world. The first one is the concept of culture. Now, culture, I explain culture in terms of it's kind of like the water in which the fish lives. It's so permeating that the fish is probably not aware of the water. It's so everywhere. The entire world is entirely enveloped in water, so therefore they probably don't have a concept of water. Culture is similar to that. It is everything around us. Not only the norms and expectations for our behavior in certain groups of people, but even our physical surroundings. The facts that we have in the West, we have square buildings, we have electric lights, I have a computer and a camera. That technology, that's called material culture. It's kind of what archaeologists look at material culture that has been left over from long gone civilizations and try to imply as to what life was like based on that material culture that's left over. All of those are in play at any given moment within our society, part of our culture. Now, there's all of the physical culture, but when we take a look at the non-physical culture, I like to personally describe it by looking at three terms. And those are norms, values, and expectations. Now, just to be so clear about these, norms are what we consider to be normal behavior. Whatever that means, whether it's my behavior when I'm in a particular group or my behavior in general as a reflection of my personality, or what are the limits of behavior in terms of the law, whether you put elbows on your table, all of that stuff comes under norms. Values are the things that are important to us, and expectations are when we act out in society. How do we expect society to respond? And when it doesn't do that, it's violating our expectations. When it does, so I'm at the grocery store and have my groceries and I hand a wad of cash to a stranger, and my expectation is that they're going to give it back to me. What if they're going to give me my change back? What if they didn't? That'd be a violation of my expectations of the role, the roles that we have here, and my part's to give you enough money to pay for my groceries, and you're supposed to give me what's left over. And so that's an expectation in terms of the interactions that are going on. So I collectively talk about culture as filled with norms, values, and expectations for all the people in our lives and all the actions that we take in our lives. A very, very key aspect of understanding how our personal behavior, our disposition, aligns or doesn't align with the norms, values, and expectations of any social group. The next part we want to look at is social structure. Now, within those expectations, there are concepts of social structure that principally lay around two terms, and that is social status and social role. Now, even I will use those interchangeably, but let's get the official term out there. The best way you can think about this is the social status, or our status, is the job title, and the role is the job description. Sometimes we'll use the role, like I am playing a role in a play, and it's the title of that's the title of the person. But sticking to sociology here to kind of ease the understanding that these things are actually different, we have a title, a job title, and there's a job description, status and roles. The first part of social structure is the relationship between those two. Let's say the social status is father. What does that mean in your particular culture? What behaviors go along with that? What behaviors go along with mother? What go on with teacher? What go on with minister or pastor? What goes on with policeman, policewoman? Any one of those. And then we have this job title, and we have these sort of expected roles that go along with that. And again, when those get violated, we're like, whoa, what happened there? You violated the social expectations because what you're doing doesn't match your job title, or you've stepped out of line. We'll talk about what happens when we step out of line in a moment. The other thing about social structure is the relationship between different statuses. And here we get that word status as sort of like the hierarchy. So high status versus low status, it's the same word, but if you combine it with our understanding of status as a job title, you can see where there's a hierarchy based on job title. Now, one of the practical ways in which we can think about status and role are in two dimensions. Here's the social structure. And then, let's go back to that. Here's the social structure. going to see it, like say an example of an organization with the president and vice president. And the president, this president title is status, what their job description, including in this diagram, the supervision of 2 vice presidents, and then of course the managers on the bottom. This kind of, that shows some of the social structure that's there. Now, got a little ahead of myself. We have status and role. And one of the cool applications of status and role are 2 concepts called role conflict and role strain. Now, let's take this apart. Let's unpack this a little bit. So I have a job title, status, and I have job duties along with that, my role. I have other job titles. All of us have multiple ones of them, and I have job duties that go along with them. Sometimes those don't get along very well. Sometimes it's really hard to keep them all going. Right now, you are probably entertaining job titles, statuses like daughter, son, brother, cousin, friend, college student, high school student, athlete. I mean, that goes on. Then you're in dance. You're in. You got your friends that you're dealing with. You got these 10 statuses, and you have all of these things, all of these roles that go. Each one has its own unique job description, and the more of those you keep going, you can experience stress with that. When you have a lot, it's hard to keep all of those statuses and roles in line. That is what we call role strain. Role conflict is when it becomes, there's an instance where it becomes impossible to complete the role of any 2 different statuses. So let's say you have a very, very important test that you're going to be taking in school, and your student status, part of that role is study. You also are an athlete, and part of that expectation is that you're going to play and practice all weekend and then play the game. And you're looking, I can't do both of these at the same time. It's not going to have there at the same time. Or maybe that's more of a strain. Let's say there's a play. You have a brother who's in a play in kindergarten, and you have a game that day. You have to pick which one are you going to go to, and that's what we call role conflict. So making my way through this list here, let's go back to this. We have culture. We have social structure that organizes the status and roles. We have status and roles itself that present to us role conflict and role strain. And then the concept of social control. This is kind of, I find this pretty fascinating. Social control, in the concept within sociology, envelops everything that has to do with when somebody steps out of line. When you're in your family, if you step out of line of the social expectations of your family, what happens? Depends on the event, depends on the severity, depends on the timing of it. But let's say you're supposed to do the dishes and you don't do the dishes. What happens? Maybe you get punished, maybe you get a talking to, maybe you get a chance to do it, maybe there's a response that tries to get you to come back in line with the expectations of that group. The same with every group. What if you don't pass in your material for class? You end up with a failing grade and you have to take it over again. That there's consequences that are there, that the social circle that you're dealing with at that point says, if you want to be a member of this group, this is what you need to do. Social control mechanisms exist where it's part of that social structure that defines how they're going to reach out to you and pull you back into the group. So my little analogy of that here, here's a social group and here's you in it. Now you're behaving within the norms, values, and expectations of that group, and then you act outside of it. These are your friends, let's say, and then you've decided that you're not going to go out with them on Friday night. Expectation was you were supposed to go, you've gone every other time, now you're not going to go. The social control mechanism is this little fishing rod These are the phone calls that go out to you and they say, hey, come on back. Let's go. The pressure, peer pressure to come back in to be compliant with the expectations of that group. That little fishing rod covers everything from your friends texting you and reminding you that you said you were going to be there to actually, the other extreme of the examples would be how you get fines, tickets, jail time for acting outside the rules of our society, for committing crimes. So all of that, all of those things, and our knowledge of them shape our individual behavior. So when we become associated with a group, part of the orientation or socialization is what we call it in sociology, is to tell you what will happen if you act outside of the expectations of the group. Part of the formal orientation of almost every encountered group that you ever will come against will say, this is what you need to do to be a part of this group, and this is what you're going to do to get kicked out. And that will be, and what will happen, 3 strikes, you're out. Will it be, getting good talking to, and then you're going to get kicked out? Whatever is the expectations of that particular group. The last piece here is looking glass self. Now, looking glass self is an aspect of social control. It's one of my favorite topics within all of my classes. This concept comes up all the time in many, many, many of my classes. And what it has to do with is, as we grow up, the psychology of it is that we become attached to people, and those individuals become important in our lives. Their opinion of us make a difference. Some of them we have no choice, or the parents we're born to, or the people who raised us, or teachers early in life. These individuals can have a tremendous impact on us, and their opinions and thoughts about us impact us. Now, this is a truism. Even though we might verbally say out loud, I don't care what anybody thinks, that's actually really not true. We want people in our lives to which we will turn to and rely upon them to give us good feedback about how we're doing. That's a mature way of making ourselves go through the world. Now, that process of placing people in that, I'll say, the looking glass committee, early in life, we have no say in who's on that committee. As we go through life, we may encounter people that we want to put on that committee. A romantic relationship that's blooming into something pretty serious, we are probably screening that person for membership on the group. Because if you're in a relationship with someone, that's the individual that you would trust to give you honest feedback. If you're about to go out and your outfit looks horrible, or you haven't shaved and somebody has to tell you something, hopefully it's the person that cares about you the most that says, hey, that's not your best look. I want your best look. Let's, go do this. At the same time, as you grow older, there may be individuals on your committee who need to get booted off the committee. It's a serious thing to do, serious thing to consider, because the group is supposed to be socially controlling you. This is the group that I put together over time, the important people in my life, and they're not always supposed to be positive about what I'm doing. We have to be certain that they are supposed to teach us. We're supposed to turn to that group and say, how am I doing? Help me with your wisdom. Help me to move forward. So knocking off your parents and all that stuff, that's really not what I'm advocating for, as much as particularly later in life, you start thinking, well, who's important? Who do I really want to have that much control over my life? Somebody's going to have that kind of control. We always have individuals to which we are speaking to or responsible to. So here we have this sort of graphic here. We have kind of exemplifying this. This individual is looking at 4 mirrors. Okay? The looking glass self analogy is the looking glass, just like Alice in the Looking Glass, is a mirror. When we look in the mirror, we imagine how members of our looking glass committee see us, and we self-evaluate based on that perspective. So here's looks to the left, and he sees, this is how my mom and dad see me. I'm an angel. Looks to the girlfriend, he's muscular. Looks to the older brother, he's a weakling. And how my ex-girlfriend sees me, you're the devil. This individual looks at these 4 individuals and develops a self-concept. Notice that at this point in this individual's life, the ex-girlfriend is still playing a role on the committee, even though they've let even though they don't have a relationship with that individual. Sometimes individuals can stick on that committee. We kind of give them a permanent chair. And that's when you need to start thinking, who is on my committee? Are they worthy of the role of helping me live my best life and make good decisions? Sometimes we have a pretty good committee. This is my committee, let's say, made up of important people of my life. I do something, I look in the mirror and I say, what with this first person, they think that it's okay. The second person, they're okay. But third and fourth person, not really. The last person, yes. So I make a decision as to what's the best thing for me. Sometimes, however, we're stuck with this. What if there's a person on your committee all the time? You're a lousy, good-for-nothing, stupid idiot. What a horrible thing to say. And we may have people on our committee, negative individuals in our lives, who continually telling us that we're not worthy of anything. As a psychologist, I've often dealt with individuals who have had an abusive relationship or an abusive upbringing, and there are people in their lives. Sometimes those individuals are not even around anymore. They might have even passed away, and yet their presence is still felt in their lives. Their kind of overarching presence. At the same time, there could be the positive. I have had numerous individuals who have told me that the grandfather or grandparent that they were closest to passed away, but they still feel the support from that individual somehow in their current lives. So it can be good or bad. It's not just bad. And that for that individual, their grandfather or grandmother might remain on their lives, on their committee, and they would always say, what would grandpa say about this? Even though grandpa's not around anymore, they may say, what would grandpa see about this? And they would incorporate that into how they feel about themselves because they trust those individuals. That's another important part of this looking glass self. It's not just you're getting opinions and it's a vote. You're getting opinions and you're incorporating those into yourself. So the individual who still has his ex-girlfriend on his committee has some negative feelings about themselves because that individual remains on their committee. And so when the person's talking out loud about it, they might not even acknowledge that this came from the committee. That might feel like it's coming from themselves. So there's kind of a very, very, very critical type of theory there. I encourage you to look it up and read all about it. So, in this brief overview of social psychology, the relationship between society and the study of society and sociology and psychology, we talk about the power of the situation changing our behavior despite our personalities and our normal sets of behavior, the role of culture, social structure, status and roles, then the interaction with other people, and then finally on the looking glass self. All of these things that really bring us to the point to say that, yes, we are the creators of our personality, but they are created within a context, and that context deeply affects us. And I would say, depending on which research that you kind of lean toward, it's almost like more of ourselves come from that social upbringing. When you start to consider all the things that we think and all the things that we understand about the world that are actually socially contextual, meaning people from other societies don't think that way. then you're like, well, that's just my natural way of thinking. But that natural way of thinking was the product of an interaction between your emerging psychology and the sociology going on around you, what you were taught. We are largely individuals as a result of nurture as opposed to nature. Nature's huge, genetics are huge, that's great, but the nurture part, the impact of our families and culture on our upbringing is a tremendously important shaper of who we are. And that's really what the field of sociology looks at. So that's it for this chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.